Let's get stuck into this with Gospel Obele. He's an economist for Streetnomics. That's a Nigerian think tank. Thank you for your time, Mr. Obele. So the Naira is rebounding, but the country is burning through the foreign exchange reserves at a rate not seen in 4 years. Can you explain the connection and if it's a concern?
Yes, first to say that there is a supply issue. That's a given because we're not generating enough foreign exchange receipts, particularly from non-oil exports, as the case may be. As a result, there is a constraint around how much of dollar supply is available in the Nigerian economy to be able to meet its consistent increase, its ever-rising, local demand for the exchange. And that's really been the challenge for a long time. And again, juggling the fact that Nigeria is not so much of a productive nation in terms of production capabilities and export capabilities to rake in more foreign exchange receipts. So that supply gap is why you also find the central bank trying to resort to its reserves to fund most of its, should I say, short-termist reforms that we've seen more recently.
Yeah, I'm glad you said you're calling them short-term reforms. If you look at, we keep saying that Nigeria is Africa's largest oil producer, yet it actually imports most of the petrol that it uses. Is the country looking at longer-term resolutions to the long-standing economic problems?
Yes, the country is, but however, I think it's a case of, number one, there's a gross underestimation of the efforts, investment, behavioral and cultural change that needs to happen, to steer the country in a more sustainable path of progress and prosperity. Also, given the fact that there is a very weak political will in context, although more recently the current administration, led by the current President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has shown some little bit of more political will, but again, it's still not sufficient with regards to the level of change or progress or prosperity that needs to happen.
What are the behavioral and the cultural changes that you think need to happen? Nigeria has been beset with corruption, for example, for so many years.
Well, one of the major behavioral change in my own context would be leading reforms, from a ground-up through a ground-up approach, all right, that are very reflective at the subnational and local levels, and ensuring that reforms are a reflection of what the people need at a particular point in time, and how market forces are also reinforcing, the position of those reforms and the delivery of those policy programs. Take, for instance, the cash transfer program. Whilst it's a necessary condition to be able to sort of deliver relief points for Nigerians, we also need strategic sector landslide interventions that will sort of power key sectors in the local economy, and also encourage non-oil sector MSMEs to sort of, export. There's so many Nigerian businesses that are export ready, but they do not have the finance or access to markets, capabilities to do more within and across borders. So the cultural and behavioral change is largely around institutional support and interventions to a large extent.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so how do you enable that, that financial support, that investment, and what role does foreign investment have to play? I mean, foreign capital has really fled Nigeria in the past few months.
Yes, it's quite disheartening, and this is largely linked to the poor, business environment to a large extent. We've seen many other Nigerian African nations, rather, who are much more attractive for foreign investment, as the case may be. So we need to, first and foremost, for Nigeria, need to face our structural challenges, all right, the structural issues around power, infrastructure, particularly security, and all that, and also the ease of doing business, contracts, regulations, bottlenecks, and all of these things, and even the business environment itself. All right, so that needs to be fixed. Once that is fixed, with a very strong coordinative support of the Naira, of the currency, between the fiscal and the monetary bit, it's going to be a lot more easier for us to sort of, find a pathway towards prosperity and regulations that actually strengthen the local currency for local businesses.
Okay, and what about the local people? Do you see that the changes that have been made will in fact benefit Nigerians themselves?
I don't think the changes will really benefit Nigerians in the short term, and that's because there was a deepening cost of living crisis, and the average Nigerian is getting poorer and poorer. consumer classes are constantly shrinking. And we've also seen a case where prices of goods and services are not necessarily coming down. Even if we succeed at inflation, the cost of living crisis are eating very deep into the core production and consumption elements right now locally in Nigeria, right? So what we now need is rethinking the sectoral interventions that must happen in the different blocks of sectors that have the capacity to lift the Nigerian people from just poverty or mid-level poverty, to more sustainable paths when it comes to prosperity, as the case may be. So for me, it's more around driving sectoral landslide interventions that can unlock prosperity at the pace and at the scale at which Nigerians need it the most to not just survive, but to also grow and thrive in the midst of the evolving cost of living crisis and uncertainties.
And of course, that has an impact on Africa, doesn't it? Given Nigeria is the most populous country, largest economy.
Yes, it does have an impact on Africa. To a very large extent for me will be that we need to evolve in our negotiations and conversation in terms of value add and what value we bring to the table. Most of the challenges we find in Nigeria are very consistent in many other African countries. The quality of leadership, quality of reform, security, cultural change, institutional behavior, and all of the likes. So until there is a structural and institutional reform, we may not be able to bring about the necessary growth and development Africa needs, particularly in channeling those growth and development to be owned and powered by Africans in context of the prosperity that the region really needs to be able to unlock newer levels of sustainable development.
Gospel Obele of the Nigerian think tank Streetnomics, thank you so much for your insights on this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.